Hello, TV and movie fans. Today I'm talking with director John Ansel. Please
Ainsley.
help me, Ansley. I'm today. Hello, movie and TV fans. Today I'm talking to John Ansley. Please help me welcome him to the show. How are you today, sir?
I'm good, thanks.
Today we're talking about the film Do Not Disturb, and it's a psychedelic exploration of love, lust, and what can I say? Very much a carnal desire. The film will be released on November 17th on demand and November 21st via Dark Star Pictures. So the first question I have is, what inspired this film? Because let me tell you, this was a wild ride.
It's, everyone seems to be saying it's a wild ride.
I
It's
mean, is they're true. It's true. I mean, sort of the background. How did you come up with the story? And was there any true life research that you might have
yeah.
done for the film? There were some new terms in here for me.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's always research, and there's always. I mean, cannibalism is always just a great, fun subject for me. Another thing I always come back to is cutting up bodies. I always find movies cut up bodies, but nobody thinks about like how awful that must be to like cut through bone and like grizzle and like the smell and the filth of it all. And movies tend to do it, but I can't see people getting through it without gagging and practically being grossed out by it. But the concept for me came, I don't know why, I just wrote down, I'm always writing down weird things, but this one stuck. And I just wrote down on a piece of paper, honeymoon couple develops cannibal sex fetish. And then I mixed that with the peyote and wrote out the first draft. And it was kind of cheesy and kind of tropey. And then I reworked it. And I kind of came up with using the cannibalism as a metaphor for the way we eat each other alive emotionally in relationships, especially bad
Okay.
relationships.
Wow.
And then so from there, I sort of played with patterns of abuse. And I mean, if you watch the film, it's really the same scene or sequence of scenes over and over and over again. They enter the room, they argue, and then they do something, and it escalates, and then the roles are reversed, and it's a different thing. But it's significant. It's the same as a sort of an abusive relationship where you keep going back for more
Hmm.
until
Hmm.
finally you've had enough, or you get eaten.
Yeah, or you get eaten. Yeah,
Yeah,
eaten alive. No, I like that description and breakdown because I was getting to that watching it. Like I saw the dysfunction, right? And I saw the abuse and then it didn't go its typical direction from a
yeah,
normal movie like that. It just went total left. But that's like you said, the cycle was still there. And I'm like, oh wow, I wonder if that's it. So I'm glad you really confirmed that, that
yeah,
metaphor. I love
yeah.
deep movies. I love movies that make you think, it is a draw. Like you look at it, and you watch the film, and you're like, "What's going to happen next?" Because it was unpredictable. And I think that was a great thing about it. There was no way to tell what direction or what was going to happen. You really had to just strap in to see
And
where they
hold on.
landed at.
Yeah, and that's kind of how I wanted to do it. I kind of like. I mean, it's a really tense film, but there's no sort of traditional
Hmm.
suspense scenes, and there's
Hmm.
no, but it's like this relationship and the elements of the relationship and what happens in that room sort of build on each other and hopefully create this sort of feeling of anxiety within the viewer.
Hmm. So I'm gonna bring up the trailer just in the background,
Sure.
but I'm not gonna. It won't. The audio won't disturb us, but just so the fans can catch a glimpse of what we're talking about here. And so I think one of the keys to this movie is that everyone does weird and crazy stuff in hotels, right? Or at least they think that they do. I mean, we see
Yeah.
in the news all the time. Someone in a hotel room doing something, or we drive past a shady motel, and you're like, I'm sure they're doing crazy
Yeah.
stuff in there, or I would never want to stay in that. And, you know, have you ever personally had like do not disturb moment? Maybe not as wild, but it's just like you're in a hotel room and you're like, man, I would have never done that at home.
I mean, I've had a couple. I mean, it's funny because hotel rooms, and I think when you live in an apartment, which I have lived in a couple apartments in my life, and I think it's kind of interesting that you're sharing the air with all these strangers.
Hmm.
And you're alone and you've got your life, but like on the other side of two sheets of drywall, there's a whole person doing who knows what.
Mhm.
And I've always found that fascinating of what goes on behind these closed doors and what goes on in your mind. I don't know if I've ever had sort of anything that interesting happen to me in real life, but unfortunately, um,
One part I like
yeah,
that, you put in the film is with the bellboy, I guess, or
yeah,
I guess the delivery guy. I mean, just
yeah,
that, it was a subtle, looking, and then it was more looking and more looking, but it's like that's real. Like you kind of, you see the staff, you kind of wonder who those people are. Kind of like how you just
right,
said, like wonder who this person is, and then it's like you see him again, and you like, is this person following me, or something like that. And I feel like you built a lot of the suspense, there with just that small part.
good. Yeah, no, it's that was an interesting scene to shoot because it was tough to pull off in a lot of ways. But yeah, I mean, you're always creating little elements that hopefully trigger something within the viewer to like expect something to happen or not expect or wonder, just to keep them interested in watching the rest of the film, at least more interested in the film than they are in their phones, which is always a big battle in this day and age.
Oh yeah, definitely 100%.
Yeah, especially with, I think, this film, because it starts, now I don't think it starts slow, but I think in terms of modern definition it might start slow, in terms of there's no real blood or horror for the first 20 minutes at least.
Hmm.
And it really, but I think all that sort of slow build and all that information you gather in that opening is what feeds the tension later on. So I think it's necessary. I find a lot of like, especially mainstream films that just jump right in right away, and they're
Hmm.
fun and they're, their own thing, but I don't really care about the characters often.
Hmm.
I mean,
Yeah, that's
I
true.
struggle with that in certain films.
Now, were there any other films that influenced your take on this? Because it gave me a lot of Hunter S. Thompson,
Sure.
Fear and Loathing type of vibes.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Fear and Loathing. I mean, I wanted to do something psychedelically that was very different from Fear and Loathing, in terms of a more natural sort of high, more in the head and less visual,
Mhm,
which is difficult. I mean, I still did it visually, but not with effects. And so it's about disorientating the viewer in a way that you are when you
mhm.
drop acid or take peyote or whatever. And I did that through time and continuity.
Yeah.
The biggest film for me in this one is Bug, is William Friedkin's Bug, which is not the most popular movie, but it's so underrated and so good. And it's Michael Shannon, a very young Michael Shannon, and Ashley Judd,
Mhm,
and they're together in a motel room, losing their minds, and you don't really know what's real and what's not, and it's kind of fun. And that one's big on for me, anyways.
mhm. Yeah, I mean, in reference to that film, I still think about the outcome of that and what was true and what was not, and I love that about that film is that you spend that whole time, you feel like you were there in the room with them, like, you spent the whole time with them,
Yeah,
and then you feel like you get to the end and you still don't know what was real or what was not. And then even to what you just said about the time skips, that was to me that was the scariest part that I thought of when they lost so much time, right? And he's like, "Well, it's 11 o'clock. It started at 2, and then
yeah,
there was this big gaps of time that, like you said, it kept happening where they kept losing these big chunks of time, and I mean that's scary. That was definitely scary part.
yeah. That's the because that is kind of the effect of a lot of narcotics. Um, and that's really kind of fun to do with the audience too, right? Because you're watching the movie, and then all of a sudden what you think you were watching is wrong, and then it
Mhm,
changes on you, and you've got to sort of adjust. And then I think you go from that moment not trusting what might come, and then it makes you all suspicious in a
mhm.
fun way. So
Yeah, it makes you think that there was something you had to look at or find, or maybe the movie will explain something that you might have missed,
yeah,
right? So it draws you in a little bit more. My next question is, we talked about the genre and the cannibalism genre, and you named a couple films. You named Bug, but there's some other notable ones like Green
sure.
Inferno. Raw was a big one, and even the most recent one that I did see, Bones and All.
I haven't seen
It
that one yet. Yeah.
How do you think your film will what place do you think it will have amongst these films?
Uh, I don't know. I mean, like, that's not up to the audience will decide that one.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. It's a different. I mean, Bad Batch is a really that's one of my favorite films um, of all time. I
Hmm.
would say because that one visually is just such a great, stunning film, and I love the way I just love the way she works the narrative in that film because it's something that I try to do is making a sort of a pretty film, and then I don't know, like a muddy storyline, if that makes sense,
Hmm.
where you're not following
Hmm.
it in order, or
Yeah.
you're kind of testing the audience in a weird way, but it's presented really simply because so that if you want to just go in and watch a pretty film and get some blood and guts and have some laughs, the film could work on that level. But if you want to like sink in a little deeper, it
Hmm.
works on that level too. And so that's kind of like I kind of like films that do both well.
Hmm.
Um, I think a lot of these films do. Bad Batch is really special though. That's another
Yeah.
underrated film.
Yeah, definitely underrated. I turned it on to watch it, and it started going places that once again, like I didn't expect, and then
Yeah,
scenarios and outcomes, and even the time loss. And so yeah, you're right. I was like, wow, and I was talking about the movie to someone. They had no idea what it was talking about. And I was like, you haven't seen that movie? That's a must watch,
yeah.
if you're into that type of the hard genre, hardcore horror genre, I would say.
Well, and it's like a special kind of it's a genre film because it's horrific, but it's not
Mhm,
horror per se.
mhm,
So I really like those kind of films that just kind of muddy up
mhm.
I think back in the day, the Blockbuster aisle when you walk up and down the video store and it was like horror, thriller, drama, comedy, and there was no real you knew which one was. And there was a couple films that kind of you didn't know where they belonged, but because I started creating like the indie aisle
Mhm,
and whatever.
mhm,
But now, I mean, on Netflix, I find like when I'm on Netflix, there's like no movies.
mhm. Yeah,
Like
yeah.
it's like, oh, action is all the same movies as thriller, is all the same
Mhm,
movies as like, sci-fi. And they're all the same movies. It's like I feel like when I'm going through Netflix,
mhm.
I know they've got thousands of films in their library, but it feels like they have 20.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I
I
know
I
what you mean.
I while I don't like being boxed in, I do appreciate the strictness
Mhm.
of physical media and where it put you in the aisle. So
Yeah. And that's a little bit about my movie journey. I've been sort of looking for more films that do more, that say more and do more, right? Than just your Netflix or your Hulu premieres. It has been getting very cut and dry.
yeah.
And I definitely believe that your film Do Not Disturb will definitely have a place among those. And I do
I
think
hope
that
so.
it will stand the test of time, and people will talk about that and watch that film. So I definitely think you did a great job on that
Thank
film.
you. Yeah.
And so um, here's more of like a funny question. The film. I'm assuming it was shot in Florida, right? Or it looked like it was
Parts
in
of it.
Florida, parts of it,
Parts of
yeah.
it.
And so, we always hear crazy stuff about Florida, right? And especially about Florida man, right? And so the
Yeah.
first thing I thought, now when I seen them, land, I was like, this might be have a little bit of Florida man stuff going on in there. And I think for when people see the movie, the guy on the beach was a typical Florida guy, like
Yeah, yeah.
Florida man, right? We don't know who he is. He came out of nowhere. He was doing some crazy stuff, and he was definitely a Florida man.
Those unpredictable people that I try to give people benefit of the doubt, but there's those people you bump into in the streets
Mhm,
or on the beach or wherever, and they're just unpredictable. You don't know what's going to happen.
mhm.
I remember one time I was in a store and this woman was ranting and raving about something. I think about aliens and control stuff, and everyone was kind of like walking away. And I'm one of these people where she singled me out and started talking to me, and I'm a writer, so I'll just
Yeah,
indulge
yeah,
that, and
yeah.
I'll get right into that
Material.
conversation. And then she kind of left, and everyone kind of like exhaled, and I just said, "Well, maybe she's right." And then I
Yeah,
walked
right?
out just to see what everyone said.
Mhm,
But yeah, Florida's fun for that. I mean, we shot the beach parts and the exteriors here. I live in Miami, so and Rupinder, the guy who plays that beach guy, he lives here too. So I mean, that was it. And that was kind of fun because I chatted with
mhm.
him. He brought it.
I
I
could
mean, I
tell he
didn't
was
really
from
give him
Florida.
too much. Sorry.
I could tell he was from Florida.
Well,
In Florida.
he's actually from Canada.
Oh, from Canada, based
He
in
lived in the
Florida. He's
UK for a
Florida
while,
man
but
now. He's
he's
definitely
been there.
Florida
Well,
man.
no, that's like he brought that character out because I just said, I mean, we talked about a couple reference points. Was Caliban from Shakespeare's The Tempest.
Mhm.
Was kind of the archetype, but then I talked about Dennis Hopper's role in Apocalypse Now,
Mm.
that photographer that's sort of like just in your face and always has
Mhm.
some kind of weird philosophy to express with you, combined with oh, there's another character there too, but I can't remember. But that was those two. I mean, were definitely a big part of it. And then Rupinder just showed up and gave me that, and it was kind of fun because I don't like to over. I like to feed a lot of information to the actor, and
Mhm.
then I like to be surprised by what I get,
Mhm.
and then work from there. But I like to give actors a lot of creative freedom with their character.
And, that was another question I had, about I guess the casting, I would say. Catherine, I might say her last name incorrectly.
Kimberly
Yeah, Kimberly, Laferry? Uh,
Laferriere.
Laferriere, who played Chloe.
Yeah,
I think she did a phenomenal job,
yeah, she
you
really
know?
nailed that.
She did a phenomenal job, just bringing that character to life. She displayed so much emotion from just like you were saying, not being in a relationship, conveying information to, Jack, um, you know, and you could feel she was being sincere about what she was saying. And so I wanted to know when it came to the casting, how did they feel when they first read the script, right? And what they were going to do, like how did they take to it? Was it,
Well, that was part of the casting in a lot of ways because we had a lot of actresses um, just hate the script, and that's fine. Um, but we had a lot of. I mean, I watched easily over 1,000 self
Wow.
tapes. It was during COVID too, so we couldn't have like auditions or whatever. But I just put out a general call for tapes, and it took a little while too long for the Canadian Union to approve us. So I got a lot of non-union, but I got tapes from everywhere, and I'm so this crazy person who watches them all. Um, and then when I spoke to Kim, and I kind of knew Kim. I didn't know her. Like it's funny because in 2014, 2013, somewhere around there, we were both at a rap party. Um, and it was towards the end of the night, and I think we both ended up at the bar at the same time. And she just looked over and was like, "You want to do a shot?" And I said, "Yeah." And then she bought me a shot of Jameson, and then literally didn't say anything to me and just like nodded her head and walked away. Um, and that was it. And I didn't talk to her again for probably 6, 7 years until,
Wow.
yeah, we
Wow.
got on the phone, and she and I talked for about 3 or 4 hours. Not enough about the script, but just about. She liked the script right away. So the script, there wasn't a lot to talk about because she just inherently understood it.
Mhm.
Um, and then we got along really great, and I really liked what she thought about the character, and I think she kind of made the character her own and brought some of her own experience to the character. And from that point forward, I think we talked again on the phone for a couple hours. And we showed up on set and we just did it.
Mhm.
And it was really about not overthinking and not getting analytical, but just feeling it and
Mhm.
just letting that performance. And just I just remember trying to like balance between being close to them and having a little handheld monitor instead of being far away, and just feeling the scene out, and not thinking, just feeling. I think thinking
Mhm.
can be the enemy if you try to over. We trusted that the script was tight and that the story was there and the characters were there, and so it's just like, did that feel good? Did that feel right? Let's move on.
Mhm. Well, yeah, well, kudos to her. She did a great job in that.
Yeah,
Really drew in the watcher.
yeah, and
And
she
so,
does a hard turn. She,
yeah.
from the beginning of the movie to the end, she's a very different human being. And even when she's not in full action mode, when she's driving back to the airport, her face is it's emoting a completely different type of person than she
Mhm.
is when she arrives.
Mhm.
So
And so, you talked a little bit about the process, and that was sort of another question I had, to someone like the inspiring filmmakers. How or hard, or hard might not be the right word, but how is it to film on a location like this? I guess typically just one room or limited spaces. I'm guessing, the room looked large, looked like they had a large suite, but how do you get the best angles? How do you go about just bringing that space to life? Because the room felt like a character.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of that was we did have a good sized room. If we could have afforded a dolly, we could have pushed one in there, but we couldn't afford a dolly, so that's such is life. But we shot. I mean, Scott and I, the cinematographer Scott McIntyre and I, talked about using the wide frame. I mean, number one, just because we wanted it to feel like a movie instead of like a Netflix TV
Hmm.
movie,
Hmm.
and so we really wanted a wide frame. And the other aspect of that was we wanted that wide lens because we shot full anamorphic and left it that way. Was when you have this wide lens, it narrows it out and it focuses on the center of the screen, but it also enhances the distance between them. So when they're on screen, it feels as though there's a greater distance in between them, which lends
Hmm.
itself to making the room feel bigger as well. But it also, when they're alone on screen, we tried to keep Kim center to isolate her so she feels alone. No matter what she's doing, she's feeling alone. And Jack was usually off to the side and framed a little to one side. And so doing things like that, um, and then also with that wide frame was using to hide the stuff on the table.
Hmm.
Because
Hmm.
that's one thing I learned when you're in a one room and you've got this, there's too much top and bottom. It's really hard to isolate and really hard to make it feel wide.
Hmm.
um, without getting lens distortion, which we didn't want too much of. But yeah, we tried to use our lenses and lighting quite a bit. And if you watch, she's always in his shadow
Hmm.
until she breaks free of it.
Hmm.
Um, and every time she makes a bad decision, he's blocking her from the light.
Mm.
So it's kind of a fun movie
Wow.
that way. Yeah.
Wow. I'm gonna have to watch it again now just for the points that you
Yeah. Watch
pointed
the
out.
light. Watch the light. We always try to keep her, well, we try to keep her closer to the light in terms of what side of the bed she's on, and then it switches at one point. But even like he shuts the curtains, or she has him shut the curtains. He'll stand between the window and her. There's always this
Mhm.
kind of tension where and even between the camera when we shoot her, he's walking in front of the frame,
Mhm.
and so there's always something blocking us from her and blocking her from who she wants to be,
Mhm.
which is him.
Yeah.
He's blocking her from everything
He's
in life,
blocking
pretty
her.
much.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. I sort of got that vibe from their conversations, really deep conversations, that they were having, and it really played out well. It gave the story a realness, like I was saying. We were saying about the some of the shows that just either get right into the action or,
yeah.
don't really develop, but they were developing this rhetoric that was, traumatizing, but um sometimes you need that, right? Sometimes it's not. This isn't Sleepless in Seattle. Everything's not a great day. And they were definitely not having a great day.
Yeah, I wanted to create almost a mundane relationship in a lot of ways that
Hmm.
we can identify with. I mean, you kind of pile on the bad,
Hmm.
but we've
It's
all
like,
sort of had versions of those conversations.
yeah, yeah. I remember, one of the shows I used to watch a lot was, I believe it was Life with Louis. Louis,
Yeah, yeah.
yep. And he was working on a movie. He said he wanted to build a character where each day was just getting worse. Like worse and worse.
Yeah.
And here we are with Do Not Disturb. They were having a wild ride. And so when it come to the script and the film, and when you guys were all done, is there anything that didn't make it into the film that you guys wanted to include? Maybe you was either too much or just
Well, there's
something that.
one thing. Well, originally, I mean, the first draft of this film was a $2 million movie, and I couldn't find $2 million to save my life. And I kind of wrote a $1.2 million version, but this topic matter, I
Yeah.
just it was just seemingly impossible. So in that version, yeah, there was a whole village. Like instead of finding the
Mhm.
drugs on the beach, they drove to this weird village I had created that was a combination, and they went to this weird church that was sort of a combination of Christian Aztec sort of stuff, and they get the peyote from this kid who steals it from the priest because the priest doesn't
Oh.
trust them enough to get. He knows that they've got
Mhm.
they're not. It's not going to end well if he gives them. And
Mhm.
so she does that, and then it was just a lot more at the resort, out in the open, in terms of pool scenes and stuff like that. You just can't afford to do.
Yeah.
But then in the end, she went back to the after she felt remorse, and she goes back to that church and sacrifices herself. And there's a whole village of half-eaten people because they've been doing this peyote for all their life. Um, so
Wow.
I couldn't do that. The only thing in this one that I couldn't do was when I talked to Carlos, my effects guy. I said, "Listen, I'd rather do 3 or 5 of the gore gags
Mhm.
really well instead of doing all of them badly." And
Mhm.
so we sort of talked about what I could afford and what I couldn't afford and how to do things differently. And the one thing that I just couldn't get, well, yeah, no, I couldn't afford to get it. We could have done it. Was I wanted to do a Lady in the Tramp.
Mhm.
So when they kill Wayne, I wanted her to rip his tongue out of his mouth
Oh,
and
man.
be bloody and hanging, and then Jack would eat it like Lady in the Tramp with the spaghetti. So that was it was way too expensive and difficult to sort of pull off.
Oh. Oh, man, I love it, I love it. Well, man, that was intense. We need this one thing, from watching the movie, we need to start a "Where's Wendy" campaign, right?
Yeah, that's a good one.
Oh, man, but yeah, definitely to the people out there, uh, who looking for a great movie to watch, who's looking for something different, Do Not Disturb should be at the top of your list. And I definitely highly recommend it. And so it will be coming out on November 17th, and
Yeah,
on
tonight.
demand, right? And so
No,
they can,
uh
what,
tonight it's out in
in
theaters if you
theaters.
happen to be
Okay.
in LA or
Hmm.
Brooklyn.
Hmm.
I don't think it's playing anywhere else. And then November 21st
21st. Okay.
is VODs. So
Okay.
yeah.
All right. Well, this is great. Well, are you working on any other projects after this?
Yeah, I've got a few things that I'm trying to get financed, and that's always kind of the game
Hmm.
of begging. I spend most of my life. I feel like I see guys on the corner, and I'm like, "Oh, my life isn't much different than yours." And that's kind of the funny thing about like working in this business is like I always feel like you're 2 months away from being a millionaire and 2 months away from being homeless at
Oh,
any
man.
given moment. It's it's a weird business that way.
Okay, well, it's been great talking to you. Thank you for going so in depth about the film. Thank you for talking about some of the behind the scenes. I think that the Do Not, like I said, Do Not Disturb should be at the top of everybody's list. It is a wild ride, a psychedelic exploration of love, lust, and carnal desire. So, thank you for taking the time to speak with me, and thank you for everything that you do and you bring to film. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. It's a great time.